Members of the City Council, please attend the call meeting of the City Council to be held in the 6th floor conference room, 801 Crawford Street, 6 p.m. Monday, January 27, 2014, for the purpose of a public work session. In addition, you may consider a motion to go into closed meeting by order of the mayor. Mr. Cherry?
Here.
Mr. Edmonds?
Here.
Mr. Meeks?
Here.
Mr. Moody?
Here.
Ms. Simmons?
Here.
Ms. Randall?
Here.
Mayor Wright?
Here.
Mr. Rowe?
Thank you, Deborah. I'd like to rearrange our batting order tonight and put on the agenda one thing that's not scheduled, and that's the weather. Beck has been following the weather, and he's got 3 scenarios, and 2 are not good. And this is an important discussion because it will impact what we do tomorrow evening. And to kind of get to the bottom line is that my recommendation is that we not meet tomorrow evening, and that we'll put as much of the work session from tomorrow night into tonight. But let's hear the report from Beck so that you can hear the 3 scenarios, the 3 possibilities, and they're not good, or 2 of them are not good.
Good evening,
Hey, Chief. How you doing?
Council. We've been following the weather all day because that's what we do, the emergency managers, so we have to be abreast of what's going to happen. The last report we had was right at 4 o'clock p.m., and that was they changed it from a warning, from a watch to a warning. So we're on the watch right now. Predictions are, we got one prediction that says anything from 6 to 8 inches of snow. That's the worst case scenario, or either in the teens. That's in the teens. I'm sorry. The next one is from 2 to 4 inches. That's mid grade. And then there's the last one that says 0 to a dusting. So that 0 to a dusting, that was before the low had formed. The low didn't actually form. It's still in the process of forming while we speak. But at that time, it was right around. They were looking at 6 inches of snow here easily. So I talked to Mr. Rowe and sent him the information. The snow is supposed to start about 11 o'clock a.m. tomorrow morning, and snow until 10 p.m. tomorrow night, Wednesday night, I'm sorry. So
With that information, I recommend that we go ahead and make the decision tonight so that we can get the word out that we not have a meeting. Tomorrow will start as a work day, and if the conditions get bad by 11, I'll send our family home, our teammates. So I guess, Deborah, would be appropriate to do this by motion that we not meet.
Yes, please.
Okay. And that's my recommendation, ladies and gentlemen, is that you go ahead at this moment, call both the work session and the regular session.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Moved by Elizabeth, second by Bill. Okay.
Simmons. And who's second, Mr. Moody?
Bill, Mr. Moody.
And if you don't mind, I'll call the roll just so I
That'd
can
be
have
fine.
it efficient as possible. Mr. Cherry?
Yes.
Mr. Edmonds?
Yes.
Mr. Meeks?
Yes.
Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Ms. Simmons?
Yes.
Ms. Randall?
Yes.
Mayor Wright?
Yes.
And
Good
it's a
idea.
very good possibility that we will have you to redo this during your regular meeting because, of course, this is a work session.
Right.
And it wasn't scheduled to be voting happening here. So just so it's official, we'll probably do it at your next regular meeting, officially canceling this meeting. But we got to do what we got to do.
You said we can't.
A lot of people are already
Well,
counseling now.
Yeah.
Quite a
Exactly.
few of corner across.
We'll talk about whether that's necessary.
We'll talk about procedure.
Well, and that also frees up your senior staff to
Yes.
deal with
Oh,
the
yeah.
crisis of the day, too.
Good. Well, bear with us then, because again, we're going to dovetail tonight's and tomorrow evening's work session into one. And so we'll start off with the update on the VRS hybrid retirement plan. Remember, we briefed you back before the end of the year that starting January 1, all new hires to any public entity that participates in VRS, the new employees will go into the hybrid system. And there's a period of time that existing employees can opt as to whether or not they want to stay in the current defined benefits or opt to the hybrid. And we have developed a education plan for our employees so that everybody knows what the details are, and they'll sign documents that say that they've been briefed and sign documents that will show that they're making the option. So that 2 decades from here, the people who are sitting around this table, let me put it this way, 2 decades from now, when you're sitting at this table and someone comes up and says, you can say, well, don't you remember signing this form of such and such? Rose has done a great job on in spearheading this for us. And Rose, will you give council an update, please?
Yes, sir, I will. Be glad to. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council. As Mr. Rowe indicated, we're just going to give you an update and let you know where we are. As you know, a couple work sessions ago, we did present to you all what the law changes had been and what we were going to see coming forward. So we wanted to let you know where we are today. So the purpose of tonight's session is to give you that very update and also to preview for you the forms that we have developed in close collaboration with our city attorney's office. Special thanks to them for working with us, and we've put together some great products. Just to give you an idea of what our plan is going to be before we get into the agenda, we are going to put together, we have a team that has been assembled to go out to meet with our city employees at various locations throughout the city. This team is going to be comprised of the city manager's office, human resource management, and finance. We put together that team to allow any employees who might have questions pertaining to either one of those departments to be able to answer those, since this is a big deal for employees to know what the information is so they can make very good informed decisions. And so we wanted to make sure we had all the resources available for our employees as we go out to these meetings. These are the various locations that we've designated. We had to consider space because we've got to get to, as you remember in our presentation before, there's approximately 1,150 employees in Plan 1 and then another 400 plus in Plan 2. So we've got a lot of employees to get to, and so we want to make sure we have ample space. So we picked locations where we could house, at least 100 folks, and we've got at least 11 sessions scheduled so far. We'll continue to do more as well. We've got some employees that might be on leave or FMLA, and we'll make sure we accommodate those. And then we have the weather coming, and of course the first session was supposed to be Wednesday, so we have a backup plan already in place for that. So we'll work through that with Mr. Rowe as we find out what the city operations are going to do. But we do have a backup plan already in place. So for the agenda, we look at these sessions being about 30 minutes each. We're going to roll out to our employees an overview of what the hybrid plan, sort of a mini version of what we presented to you all so that they have the information. Because again, the pieces about the new employees coming on board would be irrelevant to this group. This would be about the existing employees and what their options are. We're going to go into the opt-in period, the dates, the deadlines, what it means, that sort of thing. We're going to have resourceful handouts, which we did make sure we provided you a copy of so you could see what we would be giving them. So we're going to be providing all these resources that VRS has put out in addition to the forms that we developed with the attorney's office. And so they will have those at their fingertips to take away. A takeaway is always good from a meeting, so you have something to look back on. We're going to be sharing with them the upcoming sessions that VRS is also scheduling. So even though we're doing these internal sessions from the city, VRS is also going to be conducting informational sessions in which employees will then be able to come out and ask even more detailed questions. So this is sort of a preview to what they're going to get from VRS as well. And then, of course, we'll have a Q&A session that will certainly entertain any questions they have. So before you have two forms. The first one being the informational session acknowledgement and attendance form. And this form was developed so that these sessions that we are making mandatory for all VRS Plan 1 and Plan 2 employees to attend.
That's the shorter form here. It looks like this.
This was developed so that employees could sign saying they attended, that they received information, but even greater than that, it's also an acknowledgement so that they understand, again, what the deadlines are, and that if for whatever reason they do not turn in an election form by the deadline, even though we'll do everything we can to get it, they understand that that means the default would be they stay in the current plan they're in. So we're trying to cover.
These will be deposited in a lockbox.
They will be deposited. Well, last meeting you want them signed in blood, so if we can deposit it into a lockbox, I think we're doing better.
Maybe we can copy them and back them up.
So
That was one of the problems with the last
Yes.
So we're trying to make sure we cover every base possible. So we'll have this form for the attendance, and then we will also have the actual election form, which is the longer version that you see. And this is the version that lays out all the information about opting into the hybrid plan. Again, remember, it's going to be accompanied with all the information that we're going to present to them, as well as VRS. They have until April 30th.
Now, please look at the bold language that comes under the paragraph that has the title acknowledgement, and look at the next to last sentence. And look at the last part of that compound sentence. And I understand my options. And so not only are they electing, but they're also stating on this form that they understand. And if they don't understand, then we'll take the time to explain it. But by signing both of these forms, they're saying that they attended the briefing. And then second, with the option, they're letting us know, and everybody know that they understand what the options are.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Okay.
Any other cities doing this plan, or?
Actually, very glad you asked that, Councilman Meeks, because just Friday I attended a meeting with HR directors in the area, and everybody was talking about the hybrid plan and what everybody was doing. And when I announced that this is what Portsmouth was doing, everybody there was like, "Oh, that's a great idea." So I don't think they are. I think they will, and I think they're waiting to see these forms from us. But of course, you all get the preview first. So I think we're going to be a model when it comes to that, because no cities at that point in time had a plan to roll out any informational sessions about the opt-in part for the employees. There was information about the hybrid plan itself, but not designated to the current employees for the opt-in. So I shared with them, that our plan was to make sure that our employees had the information, that we were going around to reach 1,500 employees to make sure that they had the information they needed.
The comparison chart's really wonderful.
It is. It's a nice snapshot, a nice summary. That's each point about all three plans. Yes. Okay? All right, so what's coming soon? Again, the VRS sessions are coming soon. As of recent days, VRS just published 2 sessions in Virginia Beach that are coming. None yet closer to Portsmouth, but we have made a request to VRS, to our contact, to try to get sessions actually scheduled in Portsmouth. Thinking of our workforce and trying to imagine an ability for us to send 1,500 people out off-site somewhere and still be able to provide the services that we need to provide is a little difficult. So we're working very diligently with VRS to try to get their sessions scheduled here on multiple occasions so that our employees can have that as an option. And one of the things they asked us is, would we be willing to have it as a regional meeting so that other localities could also participate? And of course, absolutely we could. So they've got us as a requested venue to come so that we could have it a little more convenient for our employees. But these are the sessions where employees will be able to ask definitely more detailed questions, because again, our role is not going to be able to advise them on what plan they should pick. It's not going to be a financial type setting where we're going to be able to say, this is what I think you should do. We're merely going to have to roll out the options to them and let them decide what they want to do. And so VRS will be able to answer a little more detailed questions about that for them. Okay? And then, of course, once we get those sessions scheduled closer to our area, or even in more numbers, we will get that published. We'll work with marketing and communications to get that out. All right? Following that, we're going to meet with our employees again. We're going to do follow-up meetings with them. So we're going to have our informational sessions. VRS is going to have their sessions that employees can attend if they elect to. Ours will be mandatory. VRS will be up to the employee's choice. And then we're going to do follow-up meetings with our employees again to make sure that they know the information, they don't have any questions, that they are comfortable making this election, because they're all going to have to make one option or the other. And that deadline is April 30th, so we're going to make sure we get those meetings conducted prior to that deadline, and then work with department heads to make sure we collect all those forms from all VRS Plan 1, Plan 2 employees prior to April 30th. So we're rolling these out. This week is supposed to be the beginning of the sessions, and we'll continue to schedule them as we need to make sure we reach all of our employees. So we want to make sure we do that well in advance of April 30th, so they have time to digest it. All right?
Good.
Okay. Good deal.
Any questions that I can answer from anybody?
Thank you.
Everybody good? All right.
Good information.
Isn't that good? Good job, thank you.
Right here
You're welcome.
together.
All right, next we'll have a briefing on the Hampton Roads Sanitation District study. As you know, the Hampton Roads Sanitation District is the regional agency that we're a member of, and its footprint goes from the East Coast, from Virginia Beach all the way up to West Point. And there are 12 localities that are in Hampton Roads Sanitation District that signed a consent order with EPA, with the United States government, to clean up the Chesapeake Bay and its tributaries, which translates for us, clean up the Elizabeth River. We briefed you on the fact that there was a regional study done to find out if it was cost effective to approach solving and implementing the cleanup on a regional basis. And our position was, let's go to Plan B. Let's go with a hybrid plan. And that became the response that most of the 12 gave. So Hampton Roads Sanitation District went back and started the conversation on Plan B. And we're here to present to you tonight Plan B. This is a briefing that will result in you considering a resolution to endorse Plan B. And that's the punchline recommendation. By far, this is the most cost-effective way for us to participate. It's by far the most cost-effective way for any of the jurisdictions to participate. So with that,
One quick
Brian?
question
Yes.
before you start.
Yeah.
The two things we've regionalized has been, one's been SIPSA, right?
And we've regionalized a lot.
And then the other one was the regional jail, right? On those two, we took out the short end of the stick. So I want to make sure we keep that in mind.
Oh, wait a minute.
Because
region-
SIPSA kept going up on the rate, where we're at $125 a ton. All right. The other I'm just very cautious before we sign up, because we don't have much more money that we can give up. The jail, they want to raise it up to another $2 million a year. So I just want y'all to keep that in the back of your head a while.
Your points are good, but let me address this. There's more. Let me get out of the way of this bright light. There are an awful lot of regional cooperation. Everything from regional libraries within this very same footprint, and we're not in a regional library, to regional jails, to a regional transportation district, to sewer. The sewer has been around for a long time. It's been around for more than a half a century, and it has a very good track record. SIPSA was only on the south side, and SIPSA was unique. SIPSA was a good model, and to the Carbone case, the Clarkston versus Carbone case went to the Supreme Court in the early 90s, and it upset that model. It said that for not only SIPSA, but nationwide. And so what happened is that if you had this much waste stream coming into your landfill, only 50% of that came or to your authority, but you still had 100% of the cost. Now, that's not SIPSA's fault. That's not SIPSA's fault. It was a good model when it got launched. It was underway. So, yeah, when that happened and members of the governing body came to the table, it's kind of tough to say, okay, I'm going to use the tipping fee, but I got to go and go sit at the same type of table and raise taxes in order to cover the tipping fee. And they tried everything possible to try to start new revenue streams. So I think there's some unique things about the SIPSA. Yeah, did they do some goofy stuff? Yeah, they did some goofy stuff. But I wouldn't tar the Hampton Roads Sanitation District with that brush at all.
Or even HRT. That hadn't been a great relationship for the city either.
Well, Let me talk about HRT. HRT needs a revenue stream that's independent of its member jurisdictions. As long as you've got the basis that we'll pay for that portion that's in my city, then what it does is create a wall between the jurisdictions. Because if we're willing to pay, but let's say Chesapeake's not, then that bus line stops in Chesapeake, no matter how bad the rider of that bus wants to get to their job in Chesapeake, or vice versa. And so, again,
It's $112 million is what the Commonwealth gives Northern Virginia, and Hampton Roads gets $12 million. So it's a $100 million difference. They've got a dedicated stream, we don't. So the patchwork you got here is based on what John just said. So
Yeah, but it goes back to our taxpayers paying the blunt of the deal, just like them overcharging us $1.6 million or whatever. They don't have the money to give back to our citizens. That's, to me, what it's all about, right?
well, let's talk about that. We're going to be talking about that situation.
That's another
hold on, Mr. Moody got a question. Yes, sir.
Before we turn it over to Aaron here, didn't I read somewhere in the General Assembly there's some talk of asking for delay on the regional consent order? I'm almost certain I read something over the weekend.
It's on I believe it's on stormwater.
Stormwater.
But not, this is a different issue.
Remember what a consent order does. I mean, what happens with a consent order? Someone comes in that wrote the law and says, boom, you're in violation of the law. And so we're going to take you to court unless you enter into a consent order. And that's what the situation is that we're in violation of a federal law. That's a big we, that's the region. And so what happened? The parties got together and decided, okay, instead of having 12 individual consent orders with EPA, it would be better if we all got in the boat together because it's more cost effective. On that way, EPA is looking to do the worst first. And the worst first may not be in Portsmouth. It might be in Norfolk. It might be in Suffolk. It might be in Pocosin. And so EPA is looking for which project can we undertake first that's going to have the greatest beneficial impact. If we're all in the boat separately, EPA says start working right now. And there'll be 12 different projects, and every jurisdiction is going to be reaching into their pocket to pay for that. So with this, we get an opportunity to triage which are the worst, and which are the least, and address the worst cases first. And so, not all regional things work, but a lot of them do. And for those situations where they don't work, it's not totally the fault of
The agency. Right.
I'm not so concerned with whether they work or not, is that make sure that we're not paying beyond our fair portion. The SIPSA thing, host city. What do we get for being the host city?
Bill, you were not on council when that deal was made.
It doesn't matter.
I happen to be the city manager of one of those localities.
Yeah.
And
They don't pay anything.
They don't pay anything, John.
It all depends on where what your negotiating strategy and how tough you are at the.
Well, just keep that in mind as we go forward.
Right. Got it. Well, let's have this presentation.
All right. Good. Thank you for waiting.
I guess just thank you for allowing us to do the presentation, and I think we'll answer a lot of your questions. Just to not to jump to the end, but just as far as the hybrid approach, we're still going to own and operate our sewer system. So as far as HRSD is not going to be taken over in this hybrid approach, but Aaron is going to start off, and I'll be coming in later in the presentation. But we want to start. For some of you who are newer to council, we need to go back in time a little bit and sort of remind you about the consent order itself and what it's. If things stay the same, as they are, and we don't do this, what that means for Portsmouth, because it's significant. And then we're going to talk to you about the regional study and this alternative approach and why we think we need to pursue that. So I'm going to let Aaron get started with and giving you some of the background on the consent order.
Good evening. Like Brian and Mr. Rowe just said, the presentation tonight, there's a briefing about the existing consent order that we're currently under. We're going to discuss the regionalization study that was performed last year, and then talk about the hybrid approach that's on the table now. The outline that I'm going to discuss, the current consent order, I'm going to let you know why we're there, what the regulatory drivers were, what we've done to this point, and what is left to do if we stay on our current path. Just to give you a brief overview of Portsmouth's sanitary sewer system, we have approximately 400 miles of gravity sewer ranging from 8 to 36 inches in diameter. A portion of our system is over 100 years old. We currently have 65 pump stations, the newest of which is Washington Street, that's located at County and Washington. We have approximately 32 miles of force main with over 34,000 private and public laterals. We are a collection system. We gravity feed and have force mains that feed to our pump stations. From there, we pump to HRSD's interceptors where they collect it and treat it at their plants. We go to 2 of their plants. One is VIP in Norfolk, and the other is the Nansman in Suffolk. The regulatory drivers that created the consent order that we're currently under were the Clean Water Act, the State Water Control Law, and the EPA Wet Weather Enforcement Policy. All of these were an effort to clean up the Chesapeake Bay and our surrounding waterways. As a result of these laws and acts, we are currently under consent order with DEQ. The consent order that we're under right now was signed in September of 2007, and as Mr. Rowe indicated, we are part of a regional consent order with our 12 neighboring localities and HRSD. The order requires that we formulate a sanitary sewer rehab plan and a wet weather management plan. And part of my presentation is going to be reviewing that work that keeps us to date with staying in compliance with creating these 2 plans. The goal of the consent order essentially is to reduce the amount of I&I and the number of sanitary sewer overflows that occur in our system. Basically, we need to fix the leaky pipes, keep the rainwater and groundwater from infiltrating our system and therefore causing overflows.
Mr. Meeks?
I'm sorry?
Out of the 12, where does Portsmouth lie as far as in the middle, the worst, the best?
In terms of
condition.
Well, I mean, we're Norfolk, Portsmouth, Newport News are going to have the oldest systems.
Okay.
I mean, and so I can only talk about by age. I mean, by age. By age, we have the oldest. It doesn't necessarily mean we're in the worst shape. Our system, of course, isn't as large as, say, Virginia Beach or Chesapeake. So everybody's got issues to varying degrees, but we're probably on the top half in terms of the condition of our system, as far as being worst.
Because of the age?
Yes.
And the cross connections. You know, people a long time ago would take a downspout and, well, I got to tie it in someplace. They tied it into the sanitary sewer. And so when you have a rain event, you got the water coming off your roof, going into your gutters, going into the sanitary sewer. If everybody does that, it overwhelms the sewer treatment plant and it pushes that raw sewage into the river. So it's not unusual to find what's called cross connections in downtown Portsmouth or downtown anywhere in the Hampton Roads, because that's how you build it back 100 years ago.
Now, as far as the size, that's all being taken into consideration also, correct?
The size of...
Like, we're smaller than, let's say, Chesapeake, but we're older than Chesapeake. So is that an offset?
No, we all have to comply with the consent order. It's a regional consent order, but we all have to comply with the same requirements. And so everybody's got to develop their own plans and fund their own improvements individually within each system. And so the regulatory agencies will decide based on our information, the plan we present, what's acceptable to them and what we'll be required to do. And so Aaron's going to continue to go through that, but basically that's why we're going to show you and hopefully convince you that this regional approach is not regionalization, meaning we're not becoming a single system that HRSD is going to run, but we're going to get those regional benefits by doing this hybrid approach as far as not having to spend that money and relieving some of the regulatory burdens that the current consent order places on us.
Let me say this. Let's say right now we say no to the consent order. We still got to do this work.
Right.
Okay? And it's a lot of money.
Yep.
It's a heck of a lot of money. It's more money than any project that we've undertaken. And who's going to pay for that? It's going to be our customers. And so after looking at this thing and analyzing it, it's cheaper to do it on a regional basis.
Where is the savings? That's what I'm trying. I mean,
The
if he said that we're going to pay for it ourselves. We got to come up with our own plan. Or, my thing is I don't want to sign up and let's say just because Chesapeake isn't older than Portsmouth, but they're 3 times the size. Then our citizens are paying for the Chesapeake piece.
That's a good question. Let's park that question and go through the presentation and come back to your question. Okay?
I'll wait.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Thanks. I know you all received a handout prior to this presentation with some terms and conditions. I'm just going to go over a couple brief things. And SSO, it's a term we use a lot when it comes to the consent order. A sanitary sewer overflow is essentially untreated sewage flowing outside of our collection system. This is usually caused by a storm event. We get inflow and infiltration from the rain, and our capacity of our pipes just can't handle it. Some other causes are grease blockages, roots in our pipes, a break, a pump station breaks down and can't pump the sewage. All of those can lead to a sanitary sewer overflow. This next slide, I'm just going to kind of briefly walk you through the work that we've done to date under the consent order. Like I stated earlier, the regional consent order was signed in September of 2007. There was a massive undertaking for regional coordination. Basically, we came together as multiple localities and came up with a plan of attack. We all had the same rules, the same technical standards that we had to achieve. This was done in conjunction with our localities, DEQ, and EPA. The first task that we were to do was perform a preliminary condition assessment. We did some CCTV of our gravity sewers. We looked at work orders. We looked at break histories to see where our problems were, and it was a brief snapshot of where our system was at that time. An HRSD master meter program was also implemented. This was HRSD throughout the various localities found several locations where they put master meters in. These meters were used in the development of the regional hydraulic model. This was used to, most of these meters, however, have been taken out of service because they're expensive to maintain. The next step was the SSES plan, which is the Sanitary Sewer Evaluation Study. The data gathered from the master meter program was used to create a regional hydraulic model. The city itself also did flow monitoring at its pump stations, and that information was used in our locality hydraulic model. And there was a lot of back and forth between the localities and HRSD in calibrating the models, make sure everybody felt that the gravity was being sent, HRSD, all of those types of things. We also did a more extensive field investigation after the condition assessment We did 100% smoke testing of our system. We CCTV'd approximately 30% of our system. And all of this data was brought together to put together the SSES plan, which basically determined which basins in our system had to be part of the consent order and those which were not a problem.
I have a question. Was this when they used to refer to something about flushing the systems out?
No, flushing
That was
is
not a
different.
part of that.
No.
Because they did a lot of that in the past with these.
Well, no, the flushing was not part of the consent order.
Okay.
We also had to do a MOM program, which was the Management Operations and Maintenance Program. This was a document we put together outlining the methods by which the city operates their system. It included a response plan to SSOs, maintenance plans, tracking of work orders, even an organizational chart. It also mapped a plan of how we would continue to improve things. This MOM program is also included in our annual report to DEQ. The next step is the regional wet weather management plan. We have completed the flow monitoring and our locality hydraulic model. We have taken this data and we have created a sanitary sewer rehab plan. This is a plan that discusses what projects are required in each basin, whether it's a total replacement, whether we line part of a system, we do spot repairs. That plan right now is we're putting the finishing touches on it. We have not started our locality wet weather management plan because, as you all know, there was a change in the consent order when we started discussing regionalization, and Brian will get more into that. So we've been able to put a hold on that right now.
And you brought up lining. How many pipes or percentage of the city has been lined, or if any?
Lining is our preferred method if we can do it. It's just not always possible.
Right.
In terms of depending on the condition of the pipe itself. Lining's, it's more cost effective, it's less obtrusive, it's quicker to get done. I can't tell you what percentage we've lined. I don't have that information readily available. But in terms of what we do,
we'll get that data for you.
Yeah.
Would that be miles or just a percentage, or?
We'll give it to you both ways. We'll give it to you in both ways.
Could you give us a idea of overview of the city, what's been done?
Yes. In fact, you'll see one up
that
here.
in just a second.
Turning you off.
This is just this slide.
Wait a minute. Let me say this. Brian used the word convince. This is your decision. I'm going to recommend that you do it. If you don't want to do it, that's fine. We're not going to be mad. We're not going to pout. We'll implement. As your paid professional, our professional engineers, and looking at this every way that we can, we've come to the conclusion that this is the cheapest way. Now, if you want to do it not want to do it for some other reason, that's good.
I just want them to understand what we're getting ready to sign up for, and 20 years down the road, the council then don't have to put up with the stuff we're putting up with now. And I just want them to have all the right data to answer or vote the right way. Okay. And I'm not saying yay or nay, but I think it's fair to them. I don't think anybody in here knows about lining pipes or rehabbing sewers. Have you ever dug up a pipe? So the questions I'm asking, if you give them the data, then they know.
But there are, some of your colleagues have asked about lining pipes. In fact, Elizabeth, maybe 6 months ago, asked me about it.
Right.
So don't, again, I said what I said because I don't want you to think that this is a sales pitch. We want you to have all the information that you feel comfortable with to make a decision. And I will give you a recommendation. But if you don't go with that recommendation, that's okay. But again, not all regional things are comparable. They're not apples and apples. They're apples and hammers. I mean, they're not even fruits.
Right.
They're not even an apple and an orange.
Because, see, we already agreed to sign up for $30 million on the downtown. The first
That
phase
is-
is 10 million, right?
We've got, what we're doing downtown is a comprehensive approach to
Right.
to replace our utility system. We can't develop stuff downtown because
Till
we
you
don't have the fire
Right,
flows.
exactly. I understand.
Okay, so it's more than just, when we do utility work, we try to do a comprehensive solution so that we're not tearing up the street this year for water and then next year
Right.
for sewer.
Exactly.
If we had a big development to come downtown, there's a good question whether or not we would have the fire flows that Beck's going to require us to have in order to support the activity. So the stuff we're doing downtown is beyond what we're doing. We're doing that because we're good stewards. I mean, it's a business.
This is because Uncle Sam and DEQ is requiring it.
That's right.
Not because we're so goody two-shoes about it.
And that's the different, one's a business decision,
And the other one is
one's
a
a government
government
saying you
decision.
do it or
Mandate.
else.
Mandate.
I mean,
And again, if you were to say, time out, John, we're going to vote tonight, right now, this second, not to participate, we still have to do this work.
Had to do it
Right.
anyway. Well, let's go through this and then we'll...
Okay. This is just a brief slide to show you the progression of the consent order, starting with the condition assessment and ending in the field investigations in 2011. The next couple slides I have to show you are just graphics of the work that was performed. As you can see, the basins in white are not part of our consent order. The basins that are red are of high concern and need a lot of work. The ones in blue are in better condition. It kind of makes sense. As you can see, the red is the downtown area, the older part of Portsmouth, where the blues and the greens typically land in Churchland, the newer developments. Here's another slide showing you, based on the sanitary sewer evaluation study, what basins were part of the consent order and those that aren't.
Take a moment to tell council about our sewer basins, where our basins are in a general way on that map.
Lost at your question.
Go
ahead.
Go back to the previous slide. So all of our sewer basins are numbered, and every one of those basins has a pump station. Sewer works by gravity, and so because Portsmouth's pretty flat, there's not a lot of topographic change. You can only go so far with gravity, and then it ends up at a pump station. Then we have to pump it and get it to its next, we might be pumping it to another pump station, then to another pump station. Eventually, it's going to get to HRSD. So the sewer basins vary in size, and that's just how, as the system has developed over time. It's also a function of topography. Areas that we can get more fall can have a larger footprint, and of course, the larger the footprint, the larger the flow, the larger the pump station. So we have pump stations that literally might only serve 20 or 30 homes, and then we have pump stations that will serve 20 neighborhoods. It just varies.
Is that like
in
the little size.
tiny
tiny number one versus
Number
like
one
number three?
is at the end of Dinwiddie
Yeah,
Street.
that's
That's our
Dinwiddie.
smallest one, and that's the one that probably serves about 20 homes. And it's just how, like I said, how the system was developed and the topography. And again, they vary in size, but every one of these numbered represents a geographic area. It's not clearly defined by, say, it encompasses an entire neighborhood. Because, for example, take Old Town. There are 4 pump stations now with Washington Street that serve various parts of Old Town, and that's just because right next to the river, it's all flat. There's no, topographical change. So that's basically how they work, and why you see them in this format.
Now, here's an old-fashioned term that you might hear. We've used the term pump station, but you may hear the term lift station too. Visualize a sewer line that runs on gravity. Okay, it gets to a point where it's so deep you have to lift it up and go to the next line. It runs by gravity, and then you lift it up and you take it to the next line. So you may from time to time come across that term lift station. That's what it means. It's still a pump station.
To answer your question, Councilman Meeks, this slide shows where we have done some rehabilitation projects over the last decade. And currently, you can see where we are working on the downtown project. And the other blue
This downtown right here.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the other blue area is Prentice Park, which was completed in 2011.
Prentice Park, you say?
Prentice Park, yep.
Yeah, we just finished that.
Yeah, yeah.
Our sewer system is comprised of 3 components that are part of the consent order for rehabilitation. There's gravity sewer, pump stations, and our force mains. When we did our original condition assessment and our SSES report, we determined that there were 32 basins in Portsmouth that needed work. We did some additional work and some additional flow monitoring investigation, and we managed to get 3 of them removed by DEQ, so we are now down to 29. While all of this is focused on the consent order, we still do ongoing work in our 36 non-SSES basins. The field investigation as of the end of November 2011, we inspected every single manhole in the SSES basins. We inspected all city pump stations and gravity force mains. As I indicated earlier, we also smoke tested every gravity line in the SSES basins and CCTV'd about 30%. A result of this investigation, the city installed manhole inserts, which are basically metal lids that prevent rainwater from flowing into our system. Was looked at as low-hanging fruit, and we reduced the amount of I&I coming into our system. We are currently continuing to flow monitor our pump stations to see what the result of that work was. As Mr. Rowe indicated before, there are a lot of cross connections in Portsmouth. This is a photograph of one of our defects we found during smoke testing. As you can see, smoke is coming out of the storm drain. The storm drain has been connected to the sanitary sewer system. Under the consent order, we are required to repair issues like this. It's called the Find and Fix program. When we find an issue, we need to fix it. This is a before and after of a similar find and fix, where you can see that the gravity line has collapsed. And whether we line the system or we do a spot repair or we find multiple areas like this along a street and we do a comprehensive project, this is a sample of what we found during our investigation.
What causes most of those?
Age.
Just
Yeah, I mean, it can be age, it could be poor installation originally 50 years ago. It can be roots intrusion,
Yeah.
many things.
a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So at this point, I'll hand it over to Brian to discuss regionalization and the hybrid approach.
Okay. So I'm going to talk to you now about the regionalization. So it was important, I know it's a little tedious, but it's important for you to understand where we are, because this is what you're comparing it to as far as the consent order as it currently stands. Like Aaron said, we have our own individual, even though it's a regional consent order, we have our own individual work to do. If we continue down the path we're on, we're going to be mandated to do a lot of these different things, some that we've already done and more to be done. Very, very expensive. And every locality is facing the same situation. So HRSD brought up the idea back in February of 2012 about this concept of regionalization. And what they were saying is, if we were to operate as a single system or regionalized, it would be a better approach not only to operating, because there would be some operational savings, but also in meeting the consent order and all the capital requirements that would be necessary. And so we want to find a solution that would meet the requirements but be cost effective to the regional ratepayer. Because keep in mind, as a Portsmouth customer, the sewer piece, you pay a rate to Portsmouth. That's for the collection system. You also pay a rate to HRSD for their collection system, which is fairly small, but it's all the treatment, all of their wastewater treatment plants. If you recall, Portsmouth, we used to, back in as late as the early 80s, we still had a wastewater treatment plant over at Penner's Point. Then we still did wastewater treatment for a lot of Portsmouth, and then that was given to HRSD, and they assumed that treatment process for us, and then that plant was eventually decommissioned. A line was done under the Elizabeth River, and that's where now it's going to the VIP plant. So the sewer has the two components. It's the collection and it's the treatment. So they said, look, why don't we look at it from this regional basis? It might be more cost effective. So they paid for a study. HRSD paid for that study, and it was conducted by HDR engineers, and they had assistance from McGuire Woods and Davenport to make sure we looked at all the legal and financial issues. And as part of that study, we went, the region, we went to EPA and DEQ and said we were going to be doing the study, and they actually did an amended the consent order to extend the deadlines so we'd have time to consider this regional, to do the study and consider what the options might be, because they like the idea of the regional approach, because for one, it's only one entity that they have to deal with from a regulatory perspective. But we still have to continue to do the find and fix and some of those things. So what the study looked at is, we looked at all the legal, the financial, the operational aspects, transferring the assets. Would also transfer the debt, personnel, what rates would look like, all of the various components that needed to be studied, they looked at. And so when we're talking about regionalization, we're basically talking about consolidation. In essence, you would become one sewer system in the entire region that would be owned and operated by HRSD. So in effect, in the original regionalization approach, Portsmouth would basically be getting out of the sewer business, as would all of the localities, if that was the route that we wanted to go down. And they would own and operate not only the collection systems, but also the treatment facilities. And if you think about it, we're really, all the systems now, because of how we operate, are pretty much all connected, because then we goes into HRSD's system. So the report, when we came and we talked to you last August at your work session when the draft report came out, that it was recommending regionalization, indicated that there could be a savings as much as $1 billion across the region, both in operational savings and in capital improvement requirements over the next 30 years and due to these savings and efficiencies. The report was completed in end of the summer, August 2013. The HRSD commissioners, they accepted the plan in September of 2013. Now, several localities had concerns for a variety of reasons about this regionalization approach, both from a governance issue, how it was going to be governed, the idea of, do we want to give up our system or not? You had some localities have growth issues that still have growing, and how are you going to do extensions of lines to serve these new areas? There's a lot of questions. The study didn't necessarily address all of those issues, but it raised questions for folks, and they weren't very comfortable saying that we could support it in that fashion. But in talking with HRSD and with our peers, we said, there's got to be an alternative approach, some type of plan B, which not only did we suggest, but a lot of others suggested this alternative approach. And so what HRSD came up with is what I'm getting ready to share with you. But before I do that, we just want to show you this quick graphic that there are HRSD facilities in Portsmouth. There are 4 pump stations, and then this is their network of force mains in Portsmouth. There's pump stations in Prentice Park, on Camden Avenue, on Rodman Avenue, Elmhurst Lane, and in Churchland there's one on Cedar, off of Cedar Lane. And that's where ultimately all of our collection goes to one of those 4 pump stations, and then from there it goes into their system. So this hybrid approach that we're talking about that was proposed, it's going to regionalize. You heard Aaron talk about this wet weather management plan. There's 2 components. There's a rehab plan, wet weather management plan. The wet weather management plan is really dealing with capacity and what do we do when there's these storm events, and how do we handle that so you prevent overflows. And so what the proposal is that, in essence, HRSD in this hybrid proposal, they are going to assume the responsibility of the wet weather management and wet weather capacity for the entire region and in their service area. they're going to develop and pay for all the necessary improvements, including any improvements that are needed within our collection system. So they would design it, pay for it. We, of course, would have input into that and make sure it's done in accordance with our standards and all. And this is what's going to capture some of these savings that was talked about in the report. Because in essence, if we all do this individually, the concurrent consent order requires us to try to achieve certain flow thresholds in every one of those sewer basins that we showed you earlier that are in that are considered SSES basins. So there's 29 sewer basins. So it's going to require us to do work that may or may not get out very much inflow and infiltration, but because of the way the consent order is set up, because of the way the regulations are set up, because of the way it's enforced, that's what each locality is going to have to do. So we will be doing work that may not get us a lot of return, even for the investment that we're going to spend, because we have to focus this within our own jurisdiction, just like all the other localities would have to do. And that's where the savings come in, because now in this hybrid approach, the boundary lines disappear and those requirements disappear, and now we're looking at it on a region-wide basis. And so the whole region benefits from where we can make these various improvements to reduce that overall flow level. So we benefit with improvements that are done in Chesapeake, that are done in Norfolk, that are done in Newport News, just like they'll benefit for these improvements that might be done in Portsmouth. And so HRSD is going to pay for that and take over that responsibility. And the last bullet point on this chart is also very important, because they're also, by doing that, they're going to assume the liability. The regulatory responsibility for those issues that's now fallen upon Portsmouth and each individual locality will now be assumed by HRSD, and they will take on that legal responsibility in this approach.
Who controls the rates?
Who controls the rates for HRSD?
Yeah.
HRSD is governed by an 8-member commission that is appointed by the governor, and that commission sets the rates for HRSD.
As long as they see that, let's say they got to do an extension here and a rehab over here, they see need to increase the rate, it's possible. Is that correct?
They're going to have to raise, if we keep in mind, they're under consent order as well, right, just like we are. Their issue for them is not only their pump stations and their force mains and all, it's the capacity at the treatment plants. They're going to have to increase the capacity of these treatment plants to handle this flow. And so who's going to pay for that? Everyone in the region. Everyone in the region is going to pay for that, just like they are now for the treatment costs through the HRSD rate. It's a lot cheaper to do work in the system with pipe size and all than it is to increase treatment capacity at these wastewater treatment plants. And so that's another place where you're going to get savings, because if they have to build in a lot more excess capacity to handle this wet weather capacity in these flows, that's more expensive to do, and everybody has to pay that cost over and above the cost you're going to have to pay to improve your own system, because we're all doing everything independently rather than doing this collaboratively.
You know, my concern, we talk about a regional board setting rates. It reminds me of the Hampton Roads, the ill-conceived Hampton Roads Transportation Authority that the State Supreme Court shot down after all the localities approved it, because they had, in essence, the authority to set rates, tolls, which I feel are taxes on every river crossing in the region without any representation.
Well,
what's the difference here if each locality is not going to be represented on this board? What say do we have in saying that we don't want to go along with the rate increase.
Okay, let me address that. The Supreme Court ruled on the authority because they had the authority to set taxes, and that was the big rub. They had the authority to levy taxes, and it's against the Constitution to levy a tax if you're not directly elected. Now, it's been long held just most recently by the Supreme Court that a utility rate is not a tax. And Bill, we've had the Hampton Roads Sanitation District for more than 50 years. And when's the last time you got a complaint about the rate that Hampton Roads Sanitation District? You don't get many complaints.
They don't control it all now.
Yes, they do.
This is ushering in.
They control it, but
No.
Go
Listen.
ahead, I'll listen.
What they control are the treatment plants. That's
Right.
really okay. If you don't, let me tell you, from a person that's operated a plant, and I bet you there's not a single person in this room that has operated a plant. I have. You don't want, if you want to give up something, you give up a sewer plant because of the big liability that you have with that. It's all about the load that you place on the river, and that's where you get the benefit by doing this on a regional perspective. EPA, the federal government, wants the load to be reduced, the total dissolved solids. Now, isn't that a goofy name? But that's what it's called. It's the load that you put on the river from having too much pollution. And so they're looking at it at a global level. They're looking at it at a regional level. And if you can lessen the load by a project in Newport News, we benefit from that because it takes the load off the river, makes the river cleaner. Without this approach, everybody's got to take the projects on and start working as fast as you can under the gun of a timeline to lessen the load. What Hampton Roads controls now, the treatment plants, the transmission lines to the treatment plants, and some pump stations. When's the last time that you got upset or concerned about a transmission main that Hampton Roads Sanitation District did at West Point? When's the last time that you got upset about an improvement at the Lambert's Point sewer plant, what you call the VIP? What about the Nansman plant? You don't hear about it. One of the nice things about this is the economy of scale. We got 34,000 laterals. Think about how many sewer customers there are in the whole footprint of Hampton Roads Sanitation District. It goes from the beach to West Point and up on the peninsula. And so it's about an opportunity to meet the goal of the national law, which is to clean up the river. And you clean up the river by lessening the load that's put on the river.
Good job.
All right. The city's going to retain, under this hybrid approach, we still own and operate the sewer system. It's not going to HRSD. I mean, I guess make sure you understand the distinction. The original regionalization study, yes, they were going to own everything and set the rates. What we're talking about in this hybrid approach is they are going to assume liability for helping to comply with the consent order, dealing with this wet weather management and these related capacity issues, and they're going to assume the regulatory liability and responsibility. We're still going to retain ownership of the sewer system. If somebody has a problem backing up in their house or whatever, they're going to call us, just like they do now. We're going to be the ones to respond. We're going to continue to provide that customer service to our folks. What's going to happen if you agree with this? We're going to do a memorandum of agreement. I believe you saw a copy of that in the read-ahead material.
Do they pay us back per time, or what we fix on the pipes, or?
Pardon me? What? Please state your question again.
I'm reading this, and it says, we're still going to take care of the pipes,
Right.
and all of that.
That's what we do now.
That's what we do now.
Yeah. You get two utility bills for
I know.
sewer, one for Hampton Roads and one for us.
Right.
We maintain all of our system that we own. Hampton Roads bills you for the maintenance of their system and for the treatment.
Right.
We don't include anything for treatment in our bill.
So, I believe the memorandum of agreement was sent out to you in your read-ahead material. This is what we're going to place on the agenda for your February 11th meeting. This is what you would be approving. And basically, it spells out what HRSD's responsibilities are, what they're going to do, what they're going to pay for, what they are responsible for. It also spells out what Portsmouth's going to do, what we're going to be responsible for, what we're going to pay for. Clearly delineates who does what in this situation. The attorney's office, Jeff Miller, has been working with us from the city attorney's office and has been in on all the meetings and has reviewed it. And that is in its final form, ready for adoption by all of the localities. As a result, if we go down this path, the consent order that we are currently under will be revised, because now we're going to pass along that regulatory responsibility to HRSD. And so we'll have some revisions. We'll still, we don't expect the consent order to completely go away. It does provide some protection for us, even though it's a lot of burdensome requirements. But we do expect to be modified. We'll still have the MOM requirements, the maintenance and operation and management. We'll still have to do find and fix. We'll still have to do the repair the severe structural defects. We still have an old system. We still have to operate and maintain it. We're still going to have expense to do that. We'll still have capital projects. We'll still be doing in neighborhoods, doing replacements and so forth as time moves forward. That's what you do when you operate a system as old as ours is, and we'll have those renewal efforts. But we believe that this is a much better approach. It's going to be more cost effective and beneficial to us in the long run. The requirement, this last bullet point, this is in the consent order. Again, remember I mentioned we got an extension to consider the study. We have to decide and approve this by February 28th. And sign on the dotted line if we're going to participate. That's a requirement of the consent order. If you choose not to do that, then we'll continue down the path that we're on now. But we don't have the luxury of a lot of time to let's think about it. We'll wait and do it. Think about it and do it in March or April. This is a firm deadline that's a requirement in the consent order.
We'll have a public hearing scheduled.
No, only if you want to have a public hearing.
The public hearing's not required. The citizen will have an opportunity to speak as an agenda item, but it's not a public hearing's not required.
Somewhere in your
I think we should
read-ahead,
have one.
You gave us a number that you anticipated this would save us doing it this way versus the other, and I'm thinking it was $30 or $40 million. And can you help me without me going through all these papers?
Yes. In fact, I think it's represented in one of these slides.
This is under the current plan. This is again, I say the do nothing, just keep on the plan that we're doing. The estimate is we'll be forced to spend anywhere between $160 and $250 million, depending on the final rehab plan and what's approved by DEQ. They're going to force us, at best, we may have 30 years. The expectation, and based on past history, they're not going to let us have that long. They're going to require it to be done sooner. And so you're talking an annual cost $7 to $9 million. Every year, we're just going to keep, that's over and above everything that we're doing.
But right now, what are we at now? We're spending 10 on this first phase, right?
It's a downtown
That's
project.
a different
But
project.
I'm saying throughout the whole city, what are we paying right now on rehab?
It depends. I mean,
We have multiple jobs going on. If you got it,
We do, and a lot of those jobs are directly related to the find and fix and things that we've discovered. And rather than like Mr. Rose said, we might have a find and fix and might say it's three or four spots in a block. Well, it doesn't. At that point, you might as well replace the whole block.
Correct.
And then if we're doing it on the sewers, well, we should be doing the water at the same
too.
time. And that's why this is growing as far as it seems like we're which we are spending a lot, but that's the comprehensive approach. But this is just sewer, just to do the consent order, and it doesn't even take into account the other maintenance needs that we have on sewer in other parts of the city, or water needs, or storm, or anything else. This is just purely consent order mandated spending that we would have to do if we continue down this path.
What is our budget number in our budget this year for? Don't we have a line item for your stormwater and your sewer that you're going to spend on utilities?
If stormwater is a separate
I understand, but what is our overall budget for our utilities?
for water sewer?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the operating budget is round number 45 million. From a capital CIP, the 5-year, I don't have the number for this specific year, but
Carol's
over the
gonna
next
get
5 years, it's in excess of 150 million. But that's water and sewer.
Right.
But you've got some big ticket. I mean, you've got filter expansion of the water plant.
treatment
That's
plant.
probably $40 million just by itself. You've got the downtown project. This first phase is 10 million just by itself. You've got some larger ticket items, again, that are necessary. I mean, keep in mind, our utility system is well over 100 years old. We have facilities still in use that are over 100 years old, well beyond their useful life. And we stretch out as much as we can having to replace these things, but we're just at this juncture where between age of the system and needing to replace it, regulatory requirements just like this with the consent order, the same thing on the water side. Why we're having to do these filter improvements, it's partly driven by increased regulatory requirements, Clean Water Act, EPA, DEQ, all of these things that we have to do. And so we have far more needs in terms of infrastructure renewal and replacement than we have the resources to pay for. So anything that we can do to maximize that and to decrease that burden on our ratepayers is something that we ought to pursue, which is why we're telling you tonight that you really need to go with this hybrid approach, because in the long run, it's going to be better for us. We're going to achieve the regulatory compliance that we need, and we're not going to have to do this mandated spending on a set time schedule that ultimately is not going to give us the best return, not only for Portsmouth individually, but as part of the region. So
let me just ask, Mr. Meeks, what is your primary concern?
Oh, no, I'm just asking questions. This is, I don't want to make a mistake like the council before us with some of these other regions. I want to make sure I ask all the right questions. So I don't have no problems. I want to make sure we have all the information we can get to make the right decision. I mean, the taxpayers are going to pay for this forever. Once we give this over to them, it's no like, hey, can we get that back?
We're not giving anything. HRSD's been operating for
right.
50
I want to make sure I'm not.
Hold on a second. First, this is an enterprise fund, and it's paid for by the user.
Right.
There might be somebody in Portsmouth who does not have sewer, and if they don't pay this. So this is an enterprise fund. Again, we've been in Hampton Roads Sanitation District from its inception, and it's been around as long as I've been in this business, which goes back to 1971. And it's had the same structure for governance. And I can tell you that I can't remember one time where it has become an issue like SIPSA in those 4.5 decades that I'm familiar with Hampton Roads. Again, I really appreciate your questions because they're good to make us sharper too. And do you have the capital number?
For the water and sewer, it's just under $300 million for the 5-year CIP, $297 million roughly.
Say it again.
For the 5-year CIP is just under 300 million, 297 million for water and sewer.
And remember my analogy about the business we're in. We're on the water side. It's just like we're selling a commodity that you buy off the shelf, a fluid that you drink. Except we don't sell it by the bottle. We sell it at the tap. And we've got to be concerned about the quality of that because it goes into humans. We've got to be concerned about the source of supply. We've got to be concerned about getting it to our customer. We've got to be concerned about billing our customers. It's a business, guys. I mean, truly, this operates like a business. And we only have one source of revenue for this business, and that's from the customer, just like in any business. And right now on water, there's no other entity that is involved in the treatment of that. So the water customer doesn't get a bill from another entity. But on the sewer side, it was decided a long time ago, and it was the right decision, that it made better sense economically for the treatment to be done by a regional agency, and that the local governments own the collection system and part of the transmission system. Treating sewer is tricky. And let me tell you, it doesn't take much to close a river. I remember in September 1979, 2 million gallons went into the Back River. The Back River is the river that comes up behind Langley Air Force Base and Poquoson. It closed the river to a big industry in Virginia, and that's the shellfish industry. One fisherman had 5 million clams sitting on the bottom of the river that he lost because the river was closed. And it was closed because the sewer treatment plant did not have the capacity to handle that surge. That was the wettest September in 100 years, that particular September. And so, if Hampton had to fix that, I don't recall who owned that sewer plant at that time. Portsmouth owned the one in Penner's Point. It makes no sense to own and operate a sewer plant when you have the Clean Water Act over your shoulder, when you have a lot of liability that goes with that.
Well, John, to cut to the chase, are the consumers going to be looking at a rate increase because of the regional effort here?
They're going to be looking at a rate increase regardless.
And
how do you get to this number?
Well, I understand that, but what is that rate increase going to consist of?
It's going to consist of coming up with the capital to do the requirements necessary in order to meet the consent order. And that, right now, unless you decide that you're not going to operate this as a enterprise fund, it will go as a rate increase.
How much?
I can't tell you, Bill. And I can't tell you.
There lies some of the problem.
That's your problem.
No.
It's across the board. It's not.
Across the board sounds good, but how does that manifest itself?
Right now, the tolls are across the board, but who's it impacting the most?
All right, let's use. Let me.
I want to see some at least some ballpark figures on what the.
I'll give you a ballpark, and it's a ballpark only.
Okay.
What's the debt service on $1 million? Debt service on $1 million, let's say, is plus or minus $100,000. Okay. If you got $10 million to service in 1 year, you're talking about $1 million worth of debt service, plus or minus. You got 35,000 customers. Okay. Now, you charge your customer not by the unit. You don't divide 35,000 into $1 million. You pay for what you use. We don't have a flat water rate, so I can't predict what your water bill is going to be next month. Only you can control that. there are only a few localities that have a flat water rate, and those that have a flat water rate often go quickly to a consumption rate. So for me to stand here flat-footed and tell you that it's going to cost your neighbor X dollars is goofy, because I can't do that, because I can't predict how much water that person is going to use. Your sewer bill is geared to your water bill, and it doesn't make any difference if you use that to flush your toilet, to use your garbage disposal, or to water your lawn. You get charged the sewer treatment fee.
But we have a total number. I realize that can vary.
You have a question?
But we have some past history where you could go and do the math and come up with a ballpark number.
Again,
I know you can.
I'm trying to help you. The annual cost under the current, if we were to go at a loan, it's going to be at least $9 million. Mm-hmm. And I just told you what the debt service on $9 million ballpark. And we can give you what the average consumption rate is for all of our customers, but it's an average only. It's going to be, some are going to be higher, some are going to be lower.
Well, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, but the other side of his question is, if we don't do this, I mean, if we do what you're recommending, what is the cost?
I understand that, but you know, people are going to want to know. Yeah, I understand what you're doing, but what is that going to cost me?
And how is it going to benefit me in my part of town if I'm not getting any benefits from it?
It's going to cost you.
But I'm paying the same taxes you're paying.
These are not taxes, ma'am.
You can't answer it.
I mean, I can see the logic of doing this, but still, I think the average John Doe and Mary Joe are going to want to know what is that going to mean to me on average.
Give us a chance to. These are fair questions.
And maybe you went over this while I was going out. So what? Well, I guess what Elizabeth was alluding to too. If this is the estimated annual cost going this way, do we have an estimated annual cost?
Going another way?
Going the other way?
Yeah.
Let's say you save $1 million.
Is that your estimate? I mean,
No, I'm saying a lot depends, Paige, on which projects get done first on the weather plan, for example. I can't predict to you what projects are going to go first, okay? So I don't know the order of magnitude. We know that looking at the total study, okay, and having some very smart people take a look at this, not only engineers, but Davenport was involved. We had Henderson, Durham, Richardson, Davenport, and McGuire Woods. So that's a pretty multidisciplinary approach. You had attorneys, bond counsels, engineers, and financial advisors. And they came to the conclusion, and I support their conclusion, that there was a savings on the order of magnitude of $1 billion for regionalization. Now, we're not talking about regionalization. We've spent too much time in this briefing about regionalization. That's not going to happen. There's not going to be a regional sewer system in which everything from the lateral to the treatment plant is owned by Hampton Roads Sanitation District. What we are now talking about is a regional approach to addressing the improvements that we have to make in order to clean up the river.
Dr. Edmonds.
It seems to me this is a good idea, especially if the other cities are in agreement with going with it too. We got to do something one way or the other. So the approach that you have gone to bring this presentation to us, and you just named all that you had some good engineers and coming up with good conclusions. It sounds feasible and reasonable to me.
Yeah, and to me too. And I think, but I was trying to help get to Bill's point. I think all you want to say is, if we're going to give the taxpayers a rate hike. He just wouldn't have. I think you're trying to get to some percentage of what it might be.
Absolutely. Whether it's good or not, it's almost a no-brainer.
And we got that you can't do that now. But if we're reasonably sure, and when you do things in bulk, and we know consolidation, 9 times out of 10 you're going to save money. That's what we're basically. If we boil it down to the basics, that's really what we're talking about doing. Going together as opposed to going alone, because you'll save money. Correct?
Well, yes. Plus, you put a bulletproof vest on you as it relates to liability. On the wet weather plan, that liability is no longer yours. It's Hampton Roads Sanitation.
It's everybody's.
Everybody's.
It's the commission.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
And so they're the ones that have to answer to EPA. You don't have to go into federal court. You don't have to.
They can't come in and just take Portsmouth
Right.
to court.
No.
If
Under this alternative, they'll come to you. They'll be knocking on your door saying, now tell me again why you missed this deadline.
Yeah.
Tell me again why you didn't do this improvement. Tell me again why you haven't done this, that, and the other. That liability.
I think we're in agreement that this is the right way to go. But they just want to as soon as we can get some kind of idea of what those numbers are.
And we'll have that before the end of the week about.
But there's another component in there too. We need to make sure it's done in an equitable manner as we look at throughout the city. A lot of times we do not see that in some parts of our city. And we ought to be able to see, we still have a lot of places in our city that they do not have adequate water lines going in to take care of things, drainage areas in it. I think we need to look at it. It's good to do it in this part of the city, but what about the people in this part of the city when their streets are flooded and some of these other things? I'm just saying, when we look at it, let's look at it in a way that we can make things better for people and not just for this part of town, and forget what happens back over in old or wherever it might be. And that has been a problem. And I've lived around here long enough to have seen it happen. And I want to make sure that people have a fair opportunity to have those things that everybody wants. And that's a desirable community where the amenities and the waters and everything else is taken care of. Might not be a Taj Mahal, but ought to be an area that people can be proud of living in. And that has not been the case.
Is February 28th a timeline that you're dealing with?
Yes, sir. All 12 jurisdictions have to decide by the 28th. You can decide no, because that is a EPA imposed deadline. Okay.
But my concern is our citizens right now are paying for what happens in Portsmouth. Now they're going to pay what happens
That's
in
not
Virginia.
true. That's not true. Right now,
You can't do it.
our citizens are paying 2 utility bills.
I understand that.
Okay. They're paying for us to collect it
Right.
and to maintain those collection lines.
Right.
All right. They're also paying for the transmission and the treatment of the wastewater to Hampton Roads. So they get 2 bills. They get a
Right.
bill from us and they get a bill from Hampton Roads. That's the way it's always been.
Right.
That's the way it's always been since Portsmouth has been a member of Hampton Roads Sanitation District Commission. And that portion of the bill that goes to Hampton Roads, right, it is set by the commission. Again, I challenge anybody to say, when was the last time there was a brouhaha about Hampton Roads going up on the rate? I bet nobody can remember. I think I have a sense of what you're
We
looking
just
for.
want to make sure this is not the first one, John.
That's right. That's right.
Let's stop where we are, because I think I have a sense of what you want. We're going to try to do a side-by-side comparison for you. We will get it done this week with the weather cooperating and send it out to you, taking average customers. And there will be residential customers. We're not going to use commercial customers because we don't know what the order of magnitude of their needs might be.
Okay.
And remember, again, Hampton Roads, have you ever come up to a restaurant and saw what looks like a blue plastic barrel sitting on the sidewalk? Well, that's the Hampton Road Sanitation District testing the discharge, because if you put a heavy load in, you get a surcharge. When's the last time you had somebody complain to you about the surcharge because they've got too much something that exceeds the average? This is one of those things which it operates really good, but what I recommend that we do is bring this briefing to a close. I think we have a good feel for where your concerns are and come up with this side-by-side comparison for you.
Very good.
What it would be if we did it by ourselves and what it would be if we did it as a
Like the
region.
VRS sheet. That was
Exactly.
wonderful.
Isn't that good?
Okay,
thank you.
next item. Good job.
Good.
Brian and Aaron. Thank you.
Where are we now?
You want to take a little break? And give
No, let's keep
No, keep
rolling.
moving.
No,
All right.
We're going to be here all
Um,
night.
We brought to your attention that we, the city, for a long time had honored and breached the requirement to make quarterly reports on our budget. And so we laid out, once we discovered that this was not for them, we laid out a schedule for you to make these reports. The second quarter of the current fiscal year ended with December 31st. And so tonight, for the schedule, actually it was supposed to be on tomorrow night's meeting, is the briefing on the second quarter. Now, consider this a two-part briefing. We're going to give you a briefing tonight on the end of the second quarter, but at the next council meeting, it doesn't give, not
Whenever
tomorrow
that
night,
is.
whenever that is, we're going to give you a briefing on the budget. Okay? So Carol's going to give you a briefing on, again, the second quarter.
Good evening. As John said, this is part of our regular quarterly financial reporting to council. And at the next council meeting, we'll give you a forecast on the budget as well as some mid-year adjustments to the existing budget. As we discussed last time, our revenue does not come in smoothly in all cases. It tends to be lumpy based on major tax due dates. And in fact, we have over $31 million in revenue, about 14% of our total budget that isn't even due yet. So and the biggest one of those sources is personal property tax, where we have a due date of June 5th. So as you look at the revenue patterns, they won't necessarily follow the same percent of the spended as the expenditures do. But based on the data we have so far for the second quarter of the year, we don't see any significant deviations from revenue and expenditure patterns, and we appear to be generally on track. And we'll provide you with more detail when we present the overall financial condition and forecast for the budget. This chart gives you a snapshot of the general fund year to date. At 50% of the year complete, revenues are at 39% of projections and expenditures are at 44%. And the reason for the difference between the two, as I mentioned earlier, is because we have a number of revenue sources that either aren't due yet or where we had to accrue the first payment back to the prior fiscal year, so we really only have 5 months worth of receipts for those. So we expect as we get closer to the end of the year that these patterns will be more in sync with each other. Expenditures, with the exception of debt service and other aberrations, it's largely payroll driven, and so the expenditure patterns tend to be fairly regular.
Can I ask a question? The bean pole tax, how is that getting cut down? How is it doing?
Well, we won't know the outcome of that until the General Assembly. I mean, it's being assaulted, as you know, from the stuff that I've been sending you, and so I urge you, if you believe that that's a fair tax, and I assume that you do because you adopt the budget with it, encourage every legislator that you see to leave it alone. Now the argument's going to be reduce the tax and it'll bring about economic development. I don't think that is true.
No.
Carl?
The guys that sit on that chair, a lot of them are business owners.
We'll get you a list of both the House and the Senate. Remember, the Senate has not gelled yet because the Senate technically is still waiting for the recount of the Norfolk Eastern Shore election. Once that's decided, they'll organize. But we'll send you the members of both of those committees that would hear the legislation.
Should be getting that recount today, shouldn't we?
Yeah, it's supposed to be done today.
I hear it in the
All right,
news
let's roll.
tonight.
Carl?
Well, the next chart talks about our top 10 revenues, and this is important because these top 10 revenue sources account for about 75% of our total general fund revenue. So by focusing just on these, we can get a very good idea of what our overall revenue position looks like. And you can see that our top 10 revenue sources, the budget for those was about $171 million. We received 37% of those top 10 revenues in. And you can see we have two significant ones. The state PPTRA, which is the Personal Property Tax Relief Act, we don't get that money until after the end of the fiscal year. We have to accrue it back. So that's the reason that we are not tracking exactly at 50% of the year on revenue. And likewise, real estate tax is billed quarterly, and the treasurer continues collection efforts throughout the year.
I just got a question.
Yeah, the state share cost, that's lumped in with
No.
the state share cost.
That is the state share of the constitutional offices, and there's sometimes a timing difference depending upon when the costs get reported and paid to the city.
But that's different from this line item up here.
Yeah,
This is
I got you.
the state reimbursement when they tried to do away with the no card.
With the car tax.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
And as Carol said, we don't get that money until really late.
At the end.
And likewise, B-poll, we don't get until the bills go out.
All right,
Yeah.
do the math. I mean, just round up to 800,000. It's not 800,000. It's about 750,000. If you had a $6 million gap in the budget, where would you go to? The only source that you got to go is the real estate tax.
Right,
So this is important. This would be a big hole in our budget.
okay.
right.
As I mentioned, the real estate tax is billed quarterly, and we're still getting the payments in for the due date of December 31st. Personal property tax, again, is due on June 5th, so except for supplemental bills, we won't have a sense of what the total assessment for that is until closer to the end of the fiscal year. The sales and use tax represents 5 months worth of collection because of that one accrual. So those appear to be on target. Likewise, the restaurant taxes appear to be on target as well. The B-poll revenue comes in between now and March when the tax payment is due. So we'll have a better idea of where we are with those revenues closer to the end of March. VDOT is exactly at 50% of what was budgeted, so right on track. And we've discussed the PPTRA and the shared costs. On the expenditure side, we're under 50% of the total budget so far. We're at 44%. And debt service is one of those expenditures that doesn't occur in a regular pattern because it's based on when the due date is. So we're slightly higher, but we obviously will be within budget for that. Now, looking at some of the other major funds, the Public Utility Fund is so far tracking slightly over $2.7 million of revenues ahead of expenditures. And again, their debt service is running slightly less than 50%, again, because of the due dates. Waste Management Fund is tracking very closely with revenues and expenditures, and both are within the budget parameters that we'd expect. Stormwater Fund, their expenditures are running behind the 50% mark, and that may be because of projects that they have that have not been, and this does not include encumbrances, it just includes actual expenditures so far. The Golf Fund is running a deficit. That's to be expected. We plan to transfer almost $1.3 million from the general fund to cover the operating shortfall in the Golf Fund, which includes $681,000 of debt service annually. And this is an area that we will be discussing with you as we come forth with the proposed budget, is the golf and the other funds that get subsidies from the general fund. Parking Authority also is looking just about where it should be for this time of the year, and revenues are running slightly ahead of expenditures. Willett Hall is another fund that's subsidized by the general fund. Revenues and expenditures are both running below budget, but they have already generated a deficit of almost $40,000 for the year. And you can see that we're expecting, based on projections of budget, to transfer almost $93,000.
Yeah.
We went over some of these budget drivers with you at your last quarterly meeting, but we thought it would be helpful just to remind you, particularly as we're going to be coming to you soon with proposed budget and how that's progressing. We have some one-time funds that were budgeted in the 2013-14 budget. We have $3.4 million that the schools had anticipated that they would return to the city, and they did, along with a number of other year-end leftover funds. But we can't expect that we're going to get that much revenue back from the schools every year that doesn't get reappropriated. On the expenditure side, you may recall that Council, at the night of budget adoption, added $1.3 million to cover the cost of hiring additional paraprofessionals.
No, it's 19 teachers.
And teachers, yes. And so that was done with one-time money, so that's money that we'll have to backfill with ongoing revenue. And then we had $1.2 million that was in the budget to balance it, and that's with the goal of reducing that down to zero. We also have the city in 2012 opted to take a reduction in our VRS rates, and as a result, we're paying less than we should be. Every 2 years, we have the option of completely phasing out completely eliminating that reduction and bringing our VRS rate back up to where it should be, or we have the option, just as the state is doing, to phase in that increase so that we pay 80% of the actuarial rate for the next 2 years, and then 90%, and then go to 100. And so, depending upon what we choose, next year our cost could increase by $700,000 to $2.4 million. And we'll be talking more with council about these options, but obviously, if we kick the can down the road, it just means that our costs are going to be higher in future years. We also have increased debt service, primarily because of the courthouse, and next year that increase will be $1.4 million. And debt service will continue to increase each year through fiscal year 2017-18. You may recall that was a $78 million project that we financed with debt. We have other issues that we're going to need to address as part of the budget. Subsidization of other funds. Right now, that's $1.4 million a year, which is primarily because of the golf course. We want to be able to continue giving raises to our employees. We have not gotten, obviously, a request from the schools yet as to what they're asking for the upcoming year. We have not addressed OPEB, and that's something that we will also need to come back and talk about. Our health insurance costs, you may recall last year, were going up significantly, and we're watching to see how that trend is going, but we're expecting 9 to 10% a year increase. Yes, sir.
Can you speak about the golf course again?
The golf course right now is running a deficit of about $1.3 million a year. And the staff is looking at ways to increase operating efficiencies, reduce costs, and maximize revenues. Because we're paying, the golf course fund is paying about $681,000 a year in debt service, which is not directly related to operations. That sort of puts them behind the curve from the start. So we'll be looking at options, and we'll be coming to you with the budget for recommendations as to.
Are we under any contract with anybody, or?
There's
Another work session.
Yeah, I was going to say
I just wanna, I mean,
that's for after the snow. Yeah.
we have one employee that has a condition of employment, but it's a city employee. We don't. This is a municipal course, and let me give you the spectrum. You can own and operate it at one end, or you can lease the whole thing out to a company that would operate it. And they're responsible for all the revenues and all the expenses. We're at this end. But we're not totally at that end because not all the revenues that come to the golf course come to us. The Golf Pro Shop does not come to us. Now we're looking at a model like Hampton. Hampton has several municipal courses in which all the revenue, whether it's green fees or pro shop, gets reported in their budget. And that's the right model. If we're going to be in the business, then we need to credit to the golf fund all the revenue that is generated at the golf course. Right now, it's not a very good model at all. But remember what Carol said, that of that $1.2 million, half of it's for debt service. And that's a bond issue that was issued some years ago that's been refinanced and refinanced. And the best we can tell, not all of that bond issue went totally to what you and I would define as the golf course. There were some improvements made to City Park. There were improvements made to the pavilion at Badaweave, which certainly is used beyond just golf. But if we're going to operate the model where we operate it, then we're going to operate it the right way. You might be getting some pushback from rumors, but I recommend that you listen to that and give me a buzz. Our goal is to make sure that we have a way that we can account for all the city money, all the public money, and then we get credit for all the revenue that's generated at the golf course.
All of these to be determined or to be announced, but when do you think we'll have some projections? Like health insurance by itself is going to be a big nut.
Well, and that's why we keep telling you that when you look at, remember, we're self-insured, and so we compare our cost with what's happening with the industry, and on the whole, the forecast is about 9% growth per year in the cost. So we have, as we put together the budget, we have to look at, how do you split that cost? Do we take all the cost increase ourselves? Do we share the cost? Just how do we handle that? How do we handle that cost with retirees? Because remember our conversation that we had with you as it relates to OPEB. Mm-hmm. We have a blended rate, and for those people who can qualify for Part A and B, it's probably more cost effective for them not to be on our plan at all, that they go to AARP, for example, and get a gap policy, or to USAA, or to Optima. They probably can get their insurance cheaper that way because a big chunk of it's being paid for by Part A and Part B. So to answer your question, these numbers will will come together in greater focus as we get closer to the budget time.
Okay.
And the last two deal with our infrastructure, where we really need to have a more comprehensive plan with dollars attached as far as what our annual replacement costs are for vehicles and for our facilities, where we really have an understanding of what condition our facilities are in and what it costs to maintain them every year, and to make sure that we are planning for that financially rather than doing it on a what can we afford or what is an emergency that needs to be replaced or taken care of this year.
Do we have a lot of deferred maintenance issues?
Yes and no, depending on what it is. I mean, we have a lot of deferred capital replacement. You saw that with the utility. We've got, we really extend the life of what we use, whether it's a building or a piece of equipment. But on the whole, our General Services Department maintains our fleet very well and our buildings very well. We have age issues. And Dennis, the question was, do we have a big deferred maintenance question? And my response was, it depends on what it is.
Well, Willett Hall is what came to mind. We still have that.
Yeah, and that is a big issue. We've identified what the problem is. It's not an underground stream. It is the foundation of the two-story, one-story buildings that are adjacent. The old shop area that runs kind of parallel to Maryview. Water collects under there. So the solution is that you knock down those buildings, redo the foundation, and if you build anything back, build it in a way that does not exasperate Willett Hall. I was going to tell you about the elevators here in this building. This building was built, became operational in 1981. We're still having issues with the elevator. However, before we spend money on the elevators, we're going to go after the people who were under contract to maintain the elevators and go against the person who did the elevator inspections that said, yeah, these elevators are okay. So it depends on, again, the building and the component in the building.
I thought we spent money on elevators this past summer.
We're still having elevator problems, Bill. And again, just like I said, we're going to go against the company, and we're going to go against the inspector.
Okay.
Just to remind you of our reporting schedule, the next quarter would be March 31st, and we'll report that to you on April 22nd. Obviously, this will be occurring at the same time we're talking about budget, so you'll be getting information sooner than that as well. The next meeting will present the mid-year budget adjustment and the forecast, and the proposed budget is scheduled to be presented to council on March 31st, which is not that far away. So that ends the presentation for this quarter. I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Remember, we showed you all the accounting records at the last meeting, what it looks like if it was printed out. We gave you a flash drive. Roz is going to pass out another flash drive, which has, if you want to get into the details, feel free to open up the file on your computer. If you have any problems with opening the file or if you have any questions at all, please feel free to ask.
The collection rates are actually better than I thought they were going to be.
Thank you, sweetheart.
So I don't know who deserves credit for that, but
well, we watch our expenditures, and I think 50% of the year has passed by, but we're well below the 50% expenditure.
yeah. So it's all right.
Any questions of Carol?
Good job. Thanks, Carol.
All right. The next briefing is Dennis on Keep Portsmouth Beautiful. This is a program that we had participated in up until about 5 or 6 years ago. Our goal is to have a beautiful city without any litter at all, and it starts with education. We can't be the litter police for everybody. We have to instill in the people, don't throw that paper cup out the window of your car. Keep it in your car, put it in the trash can. And so Dennis is going to start this conversation.
Thank you, John. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council. When we were preparing for this presentation, I started thinking, and I recalled some of those little things my grandmother used to say. She used to say, "Someone pretty is as pretty does, and beauty is only skin deep, but ugly to the bone." But the one that I remembered was, "An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure."
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes in local government, we tend to focus our efforts on the cure rather than the prevention. And what we're going to present to you tonight is just a reinstatement of a program I think that was very, very effective. And it's Keep America Beautiful. It's an affiliation of Keep America Beautiful, which is called Keep Portsmouth Beautiful. And I'm going to turn this over. Well, before I turn it over, I wanted to tell you a little story real quickly, just kind of tee it up. John, when he came to work with the city, he would call me every morning and he'd say, "There's a piece of paper on High Street." So we'd send somebody down and we'd pick up the piece of paper. And on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we would walk down and we'd do all the litter collection. And he would call me inevitably on Wednesday and say there was paper there. So we'd send somebody down. So we finally said, well, we'll send somebody every day. Well, then he'd go out for lunch and he'd call me at lunchtime. They'd go first thing in the morning. He'd call me at lunchtime. He says, "There's a piece of paper at the corner of Washington and High." So the point I'm trying to make here is we started out with just two folks, or one person down there 2 days a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And we thought we would be able to address the problem if we put somebody down there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and Friday. Well, it didn't help anything. John's still calling. So what we need to do is figure a way to keep litter from getting on the street. That way we're not having to go back and pick it up. So I think what we're going to talk about is focusing more effort on prevention.
That's smart. That's smart.
Focusing more effort on prevention.
Send him to Norfolk to lunch.
Effort
Put it around here.
healing.
And Tim is doing a great job, by the way, so let's make sure we get that out there.
That's right. He sure is.
I'm going to turn this over to Donna, and she's going to go through the presentation, then we'll answer any questions you might have in conclusion.
Sweetie.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Councilman,
Ah, there you go.
everyone in the room. And I'll try not to be too lengthy because I know we all have to go home and get bread and milk
Yes.
for the storm. So anyway, some of you may or may not know, I'll give you a little history about what Keep America Beautiful is. And we'll be calling it KAB in the slide. What button is this? Okay, thank you. Anyway, Keep America Beautiful is the nation's leading organization that brings people together to build and sustain vibrant communities. What does vibrant mean to you? Give me some words.
Action, young, up, moving, exciting.
Yeah, all good words. The dictionary, the Merriam-Webster, says having and showing a great life, activity, and energy, very bright and strong. And I think that's what Portsmouth can be, as established with Keep America Beautiful. We're halfway there now. So Keep America Beautiful has a network of more than 1,200 affiliates, including state recycling organizations. Keep America Beautiful offers solutions that create clean, beautiful public places, reduces waste and increases recycling, and generates positive impact on local economies and inspires generations of environmental stewards. How many of you remember this? I was totally dedicated to this man when I was a little girl. I think I was the trash police even as a child. I never wanted to see him cry ever again, and I was going to do whatever I could to prevent that. So anyway, when you think about Keep America Beautiful, and with our organization, we want to inspire generations of people. We don't want it to just be, this is happening today. For me, it's been a lifelong commitment, and I want to inspire others that way too. Keep America Beautiful's mission is engaging individuals to take greater responsibility for improving their community's environment. And it believes that people and places are profoundly connected. Thriving communities are rooted in individual responsibility and action, and lasting change happens when people work together. And that sounds a lot like our vision principles. So you think about that. So I think it's really a good mesh. Some other programs you may be familiar with, sponsored by Keep America Beautiful: cigarette litter prevention programs, National Planning Day, Graffiti Hurts, Adopt-A-Spots, and things that we've been participating in the last few years has been the Great American Cleanup and America Recycles Day. How do we reestablish ourselves? We have been a kind of a partial affiliate the last few years. We want to be a full affiliate. So this is what Keep America Beautiful suggests, but we want to be even bigger than this. They suggest to establish an active committee of 7 to 9 members. We want to see everyone who's interested in taking part in taking care of Portsmouth, and we want to open it up to residents that are interested in the environment and interested in keeping their neighborhoods clean. They suggest an executive director. There's some reports that need to be done and some training. But Portsmouth, we've already done part of this. We have already appointed a director, the recycling coordinator.
And you're looking at the director.
I'll say, in that
Yours truly, to manage its KAB affiliate. We paid its annual service fee. It's $300 a year to be an affiliate. We have also received approval to from Keep America Beautiful to name our affiliate Keep Portsmouth Beautiful. There's some steps that we have to go through. We want to have some community training with all the folks that say they want to be involved. We'll have community training. We'll do some workshops. And then after all that's said and done, we're going to have a ceremony to really promote that we are now officially Keep Portsmouth Beautiful. And then we have to maintain good standing. And usually that is just a matter of making sure the fee gets paid and reports get done every year. And why do we want to be part of Keep America Beautiful? Because it brands Portsmouth with Keep America Beautiful. It's also a fresh start for green initiatives. It increases citizen engagement and involvement. And the thing is, litter is not something, I really appreciate the Sheriff's Department going out and picking up litter with the community service workers. But we need to get away from that thinking that only criminals pick up litter. Litter is all of our responsibility, and we want to get that message back out there. I also see us doing lots of workshops in the community, learning how to, have your own rain barrel, or even for beautification. I found this out recently. Do you know there are bugs that you really want in your garden that you should, bugs. So maybe let's have a bug seminar. And one of the big things I'd really like to see us do again is the Adopt-A-Spots. I have people calling me pretty much every week wanting to know what they can do, and let's let them be partners with us. Let's let the residents really take a hand and take a stand in this, and I really think we can keep Portsmouth beautiful.
Are we doing Adopt-A-Spots now?
We are under this program.
should do that.
We're not doing it now, but we are.
But we're going to this year.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
1 second, if you
Yeah.
will.
Go ahead.
We have some other folks that are involved in this effort. Fred and his group in Neighborhood Advancement. We've had the police department in on our meetings, and there's a conglomeration of a lot of people. We found out that the police department rarely writes a litter ticket. And when we talk to them, they're willing to get more involved with that, because as we kick this program off and we really get out in the neighborhoods and we start working, one of the things that we've got to do is make sure people know that we're serious, that we don't want litter on our streets. And I'll give you an example. I was on Taylor Road and Pewsville Road, and there was 2 young girls in a car next to me, and they were laughing and joking, and the radio was up, and one of the girls just reached in and threw this bag full of McDonald's trash right out on the street. So I got out of my car, and I picked the bag up, and as I started to give it back to them, they just took off. But that's the mindset of folks these days. And unless we change the culture, we're going to be dealing with picking up trash forever. So I think working with Fred and Bernadette back in the back and police department and this group and the citizen involvement that we're going to include, I really think we can make a difference. But we got to start at young ages to let people know the way that we knew as a child when we looked at that Indian. We never wanted to throw trash out the window because we thought that Indian was going to be crying. That's the kind of mindset we've got to get in our kids.
I have a picture of Donna.
To change the culture in the city. Fred, was there anything that you wanted to add to that?
That's a great idea. We need to make sure we get our civic leagues back
Get the
involved.
kids involved.
I was just at Parkview Civic League last month and talking about that very issue. But yeah, we do.
We used to do that.
Okay, next item is tomorrow night's item on Charlestown briefing. As you know, I have sent you 2 status reports.
Yep.
You should have gotten it on Saturday
Yes.
and about a week ago. So this is very much in train. We received a very late minute piece of correspondence from the condo. Pardon me?
I don't have it with me.
But it came in about 4:30 or so. It's the condo association's plan.
Right.
So the goal is to get this done without having the city cut off any water. They've discovered, as you know from my correspondence, that each of the condos does have a cutoff valve.
They do.
And so I'm very proud of the fact that our team is working closely with the condo association.
Do we track down the owners of the association? Do we
Well, see, the thing is that there was this notion that it's the people who own the 60 units that's not paying the bill. That's not true.
No.
It's the individual units. And so it's not a Darth Vader group out there that's sinister. It's just people not paying their bill. So they're on track to get it right.
This looks like a good plan, too. That
Yeah.
doesn't penalize the folks that have
Who've been paying all the
I
time.
want to thank you, everybody who's involved with this, because this could have been disastrous
Oh, yeah.
for us to have the 20, 40 people.
And it probably took that, though, to get everybody's attention. It did 10 years ago. The same thing
Well,
happened.
we were working
it got
with
the
it.
average, it got.
Paige, we've been out there working with it.
So anyway, that's the status report.
Yes.
The next item, Lavorce. Council, some of you have expressed a desire to get involved in the planning for the state of the city. We wanted to create that space for you to talk about that. And so Lavorce is going to show you the schedule of the various State of the City reports and a proposed timeline for you to work to. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council. This is a quick presentation about the state of Portsmouth with regard to the Portsmouth State of the City for 2014. To provide a briefing purpose, to provide City Council with a brief overview, strategy, and timeline for inclusion in planning for the 2014 Portsmouth State of the City presentation. Regional dates for the State of the City events: Norfolk, Friday, February 21st at noon. I think some of you probably received the email that listed all of the dates. Chesapeake, Thursday, March 6th. Virginia Beach, Thursday, March 13th. Of course, Portsmouth will be Wednesday, April 2nd. And Suffolk is Tuesday, May 6th. We created, as Mr. Rose said, a proposed timeline for you to look at. Start the conversation Monday, January 27th, which is, of course, tonight. Brainstorm ideas and note-taking session Monday, February 10th, public work session. Finalize theme of presentation Tuesday, which would be the next public work session. View the rough draft of the video and the mayor's speech Monday, March 10th. And final production to include edits and or updates in preparation for State of the City on Wednesday, April 2nd.
That's it. We wanted to give you the time and the space that you would want to have this conversation.
we have a theme this year, or is that what you were talking about?
Yeah.
That's what we're going to look for your input relative to developing is the
The one
theme.
year was like education or?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
And Wendy Bolivar is here in the room, and she works.
Why don't you stand up so everybody can see you? Why don't you come around this way?
And does a great job. Yeah, get on television. That's right. She does a great job. That's right.
Now, Wendy's one of our unsung heroes,
That's right.
and
She's nice.
all right.
Wendy, of course, does all the writing for the mayor's script. She also works with the production and our in-house team to create the video. Of course, as you remember from previous years, we used to do the video at the video house outside the city. With some of our infrastructure upgrades relative to PCTV and our technology, we now do all of that in-house.
In-house.
And so we don't have to go out and spend all that money. We use our internal people to do it. And she works with our team to do that. And so some of the preliminary ideas that she's had relative to a theme for the state of the city has to do with the idea of some of our initiatives that help to pretty up Portsmouth, sustain Portsmouth as a livable community. I mean, a lot of things that we've done in the previous year has to do with making Portsmouth a more livable city and trying to upgrade our city and make it a more livable city in terms of what we look like, beautification, and a lot of different things. So that was just a preliminary idea, and tying those things back to your vision principles. But of course, like it says in the presentation, we will have an idea with you and have a discussion with you relative to things.
I sent you an email today, too, of something that happened. Brandon came across in a journal about Atlanta, where citizens said, this is what my city did really great this year. And Laura said, well, wouldn't that be good to kind of work into our state of the city? So think about that. Again, we're not asking you to do the brainstorming tonight. We've got a big storm coming tomorrow. But we'll put it on the agenda for the next meeting for you guys to start talking about ideas.
And for the record, a lot of the cities are using some outside professional help, and I think ours has been as good or better. And we kind of critique after we leave some of the other state of the cities to go, oh, yeah, we can do that, or no, we can do that. And Wendy has always been
And by the
super
way,
at
if you
that.
want to attend one of the other state of the cities, let us know, and we'll go ahead and secure the tickets for you.
You know, we might put that question on our website to get input.
That's not a bad idea. You guys feel good with that?
Yeah.
All right, well, how about if we go ahead and do that so you can get some ideas for the next meeting?
Just be
Cities
careful.
will let you know.
Be careful what you're going to get.
You didn't say we were going to use them.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, Brandon.
very good.
You got it. All right, let's talk about the General Assembly, okay? Sherry, when I told her that we're going to move, she was in the House Appropriations Committee, and why don't we get Sherry, on the speakerphone? She and James Wright were up in Richmond today for the budget amendment to get. I'll give you the number.
Sherry is something.
What about the retreat in our vision?
Oh, you got it?
She is dynamite.
I'd say, what did we get out of last one?
As we get Sherry on the line, Paige brought to my attention a bill. Actually, I had heard it from Frankie. That's where Frankie Edmondson had told me that there was a bill that has been put in that pertains to a local government's ability to reduce the funding for constitutional officers. Remember, constitutional officers are 5 of them. They're there because those offices are in the state constitution. And so I had heard from Frankie that it may have come from one of our local constitutional officers. And so I asked Anita to take a look at it.
One of our local constitutions?
One of ours, but it actually is coming from the state association. Okay. And what's the bill number, Nita? Come on up here.
Yes, it is.
Well, whatever that bill number is, it's on the Senate side, and this is the nature of the bill. From time to time, the General Assembly will, not the General Assembly, but Richmond will send to the constitutional officers additional money. It might be year-end money, and it might be money for salaries. It will free, and it's state money. It's not local money. And so, we've never done this, but what some localities have done, and you find this particularly true in counties. Okay, if the state's going to give you another $10,000, then we're going to cut your budget right now by $10,000. And so, what the State Association of Elected Officers, and it's the constitutional officers, are doing, they're asking for legislation that would prohibit that when there is mid-year money coming down from the state, that the governing body doesn't have an opportunity to reduce the amount of local funding. Just so that you, and this is for another day, it is written in state code, state statute, as to how much we match the state funding. And it's not the same for each constitutional office. Let's say it's, and this is hypothetical, it might be 2/3 funding from the state and 1/3 funding from the locality. And localities are often asked to increase that, asked by their local constitutional officer.
Thank you.
And so what I'm going to give you is a report so that you have this in the back of your mind when budget time comes around. What is the statutory requirement for each office? Because it's not the same. It might be 2/3 for one office and 50% for another and something else. And then I'm going to tell you, too, where you match up against that requirement. And as you know, you have funded in our in several of our constitutional officers 100% local funding for positions. So anyway, that was a bill that may have gotten your attention, or you might hear about it as you go about the town. The other bill is the casino bill, Senate Bill 19. And are you there, Sherry?
Yes, I am.
Can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, Senate Bill 19 is Senator Lucas's bill, which was heard in subcommittee last Wednesday.
Right.
It did not get defeated. You cannot defeat a bill in Senate committee like you can in the House. In the Senate, it either comes out with a recommendation that it be passed, or it comes out with a recommendation that the whole Senate not pass it, or it comes out neutral. And in this case, it came out neutral. And that particular subcommittee, 2 senators voted for it, 2 senators voted against it, and 1 abstained. And so as of last Wednesday, it had a neutral recommendation from the subcommittee to the full committee. It was scheduled to go to the full committee on the 3rd of February. But somehow, and I don't know how, I don't do the calendar, it got put on the calendar for the full committee today. And you want to report on that, Sherry?
Yes, John. Good evening, Mayor Wright, members of council.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hi. It wound up on the calendar today, and it was supposed to have been carried over for the 3rd, but for some reason they put it on the calendar. Being that it was on the calendar, Senator Ruff allowed testimonies to the bill, and told that Mr. Kachowski was there, and he spoke to the bill, and that in his statement, he said that the majority of the citizens of Portsmouth did not support it.
How did he know?
Senator Lucas said that the bill is now going to be heard on the 3rd of February in full committee. So we still have time to come up here and address the committee members.
Any questions of Sherry on this bill?
It's not going to be heard on the 3rd?
It is going to be heard on
It is going to be heard.
Right.
Okay.
And it's most likely that on the 3rd, the full committee will then make its recommendation to the Senate, to the full Senate. Crossover day is what day?
Off the top of my head, I want to say February the 11th.
Yeah, that's the
during that week.
Yeah, and so whatever they get done, they got to get done between now and the 11th, in order for the bill to be either die in the Senate or get carried over to the House.
Also, if I may add, the two new senators are Democrats. Linwood Lewis was officially he won his race for the Senate seat
From the recount.
I'm sorry for his district. So Linwood Lewis won, and then we have the young lady from Northern Virginia who's a Democrat. So at this point in time, the Democrats are now in control of the Senate, which is going to set up a very interesting dynamic, being that you're going to have a democratically controlled Senate, a democratically controlled administration, and a Republican-controlled House of Delegates. There are going to be changes made to the committees. Committee chairs are going to be changing, and members on the committees, the makeup of the committees are also going to be changing. All this is going to occur prior to February the 3rd.
Bill Moody's got a...
Sherry, I'm curious. Citizens went up today. They knew about the committee hearing, but council didn't know that it had been changed to today.
Well, it's not that it was changed. It wasn't supposed to be on the agenda.
Well, how did they know it was on the agenda and we didn't?
Evidently, they looked at what was coming up on the agenda on the roster for that particular committee meeting. I saw it last night, and I contacted Senator Lucas to ask her, was it going to be heard? And she told me no, that it was not supposed to be heard, that it was going to be carried over to the 10th of February at that time. So I was under the impression that it was not, they were just going to pass it by for the day. But that's not what happened in the committee.
They voted on it.
Last Wednesday, Danny went up, Actress Small went up, and I went up. And we were told that the full committee would hear it on the 3rd. So it wasn't even on my mind that it would be on the agenda, calendar today. And so you got the answer that Sherry saw it last night, called the patron of the bill, which is Senator Lucas, and she said, no, it's not going to be heard. Well, it got the chairman, the current chairman, allowed testimony. There'll be a new chairman next week, and that chairman gets the chance to decide whether or not he or she wants to allow in testimony.
Well, we were told it wasn't going to be no testimony.
Well, it's up to the chairman.
Right.
It's up to the chair.
Who?
Mamie Locke, who represents us, was the chair of the subcommittee. Senator Ruff is the chair today. But again, as Sherry said, the whole committee structure in the Senate will change because of the majority party in the Senate.
Right.
And so we'll have a new composition, and we'll have new chairman.
So we don't know how it got put on today's docket?
No, I don't.
Yeah, I was up there and I didn't know.
It could have been a move on behalf of the Republicans.
Yeah, I mean...
knowing that they have lost some ground up here, things are starting to get a little dicey.
It's like being at the line of scrimmage. Watch out for an audible, and watch out for, you're looking at a 4-3-1 whatever defense, and they shift on you.
Well, quarterback sneak.
All right, tell us about the Appropriations Committee. How did our budget amendments fare today?
Well, they're not going to vote on it. It was just a hearing, so you can make your case. Delegate James and James White did a very good job of presenting our issues. This morning I had sent out the talking points that I had put together for support of the budget amendment, along with the article that was in the Virginia Pilot this morning, that's speaking about people changing their driving habits and things because of the tolls. So it kind of supported our assertion that, there's going to be more people trying to circumvent the Martin Luther King toll going between tunnels, and there'll be more traffic going across the Churchland Bridge. I think the testimony went over very well. We'll know by the 18th of February when the budget amendments come out exactly what made the cut. And mind you, this was just the House budget amendment. The Senate budget amendment Senator Lucas has. And she is a member of Finance. Finance Committee members generally, and even House Committee members, don't generally speak to their bills in public at a public hearing. For instance, Delegate Joanna had 2 budget amendments that was on the agenda for this evening, both dealing with the Virginia Port Authority, but he didn't speak publicly to either of them. So
it's the way it works, guys. As you know, the 2 biggest committees, and the 2 committees that have the biggest staffs are the House Appropriations Committee, which is chaired by Delegate Chris Jones. I saw Chris 2 weeks ago. Did you talk to Chris today, Bob?
No, I did not. I did not
Okay.
get hold of him today.
Okay. And the other is the Senate Finance Committee. And, of course, Louise is on the Senate Finance Committee, and Johnny is on the House Appropriations Committee. There's another bill that we all need to be concerned about. In addition to the state budget, this bill is the creation of a Hampton Roads Transportation Authority. And a little history. With the passage of the House bill last year that brought about the restructuring of financing transportation projects, it created a stream of money that goes to Northern Virginia and to Hampton Roads. The problem is that there's no way to use that money to cover debt service. It's called bonding, and the planning district doesn't have bonding authority. The regional transportation planning organization doesn't have bonding authority. So Senator Wagner from Virginia Beach put in a bill on the Senate side that was called a placeholder, and Northern Virginia has a transportation authority, and it kind of took that language. And where it said Northern Virginia, they put in Hampton Roads. It was like trying to take a square peg and trim it for a round hole. It didn't fit very well. And so Chris Jones has put a bill in on the House side that is more fitting for Hampton Roads. And now that bill has been combined with Senator Wagner's bill so that both of them, as they go through their individual houses, are looking the same. Bob went to a meeting last week, Friday or Thursday, whatever day it was last week, Friday, over at the planning district on this bill. And I've asked Bob to tell you the particulars of the bill as we know it. When I say the bill, I'm talking about Chris Jones's bill. Bob?
Okay.
Good evening. I'll try to be brief. It has been a little bit of a confusing path this money has been on since last year's House Bill 2313 was adopted. For those who just for awareness, that's about $200 million of new money a year coming into the region, which is to be allocated in a way that was designated by the General Assembly, working on projects to relieve congestion, and the goal being major projects. And as the city manager noted, as the transportation planning organization has been working through the process, they've been trying to set up some projects, some larger mega projects that would need bonding authority, which they don't have. In the middle of all this, there was an assessment done required by the bill last year to look at how the 2 regions between Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads were dealing with the situation regarding financing, and that concluded that Northern Virginia seemed to be better positioned to handle it, and as Mr. Rowe indicated, because they have an authority already, and so they already have the ability to bond and do those things. And so it was recommended at that time, which is where Senator Wagner got his Senate Bill 513 from this year, that we try to mirror what they had in Northern Virginia. Well, the structure in Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads is different. Just to real quickly, the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority feeds into a larger MPO, of which our Hampton Roads TPO serves, and that MPO function under federal law. So the one in Northern Virginia feeds into a larger group, which includes Washington, D.C., and parts of Maryland. So they do a large number of planning functions, long-range transportation planning, whole bunch of things beyond just doing the financial piece, the bonding piece. And so when they tried to copy that for Hampton Roads, it created basically two groups tasked with doing the same thing. You'd have the Hampton Roads Transportation Planning Organization, which under a federal mandate is doing transportation planning, prioritization, and all of those things. And then you would have this authority charged with doing long-range transportation planning, all very similar things. It was very, very confusing kind of a problem. So the bill that Chris Jones put in was really fashioned to try to correct that problem. And what that does basically creates an organization that would primarily serve in the capacity of handling the funding, leaving the Transportation Planning Organization still in its primary function of doing the planning, the long-range planning. There's a little bit of things in the bill that need to get modified. There's still some language carryover from the Northern Virginia bill about that as we discussed in the meeting that I attended on Friday, they'd like to get cleaned up. That will make sure there's no confusion, a number of things like that. A couple of the more interesting pieces in the legislation. There is the makeup of the authority is a little bit different than the TPO. It would have the required voting member would be the chief elected officer of each of the communities within the Hampton Roads region. So it would either be the mayor or the chair of the board of supervisors. No proxy voters, no substitutes, no chief administrative officers, no staff. Chief elected officer only. And then there'd be three members of the General Assembly. You have two House of Representative members and one from the Senate. And that would be the voting group that's in that bill. There's 17 voting members. And then you have a number of non-voting members who would participate, for example, representation from VDOT or the Port Authority. So that's a little bit different than the voting membership of the TPO, which, for those who have got to mean how large that group has gotten in terms of the voting representation. There's also some efforts in there, and this is some minor trying to deal with the fact that the Hampton Roads Planning District and the Hampton Roads Transportation Planning Organization don't have exactly the same members. So they've been trying to fix some of that. So, for example, the representatives from Franklin, a little bit concerned about whether they want to be in or out. They're not sure, but they're kind of incorporated in the bill. And then lastly, there's a voting structure that's put in place in this group, which is a little bit complicated. If you read the bill, it's got a whole bunch of population-based. It's a supermajority to vote on projects, 2/3 vote, and there's a number of population-based tests that have to be met. Really designed to keep one very large community, for example, from being able to override the wishes of the rest of the region. That was part of the conversation. So that's kind of where the bill is today. I think for the most part, the members of the ad hoc committee supported the general construct with a few of those modifications.
Sherry, do you have anything to add on the status of this bill?
Senator Wagner's bill was on second reading on the regular calendar today on the Senate floor, and it was passed on to the third reading, so it'll be on third reading tomorrow at Senate Bill 513. Delegate Jones's bill is House Bill 1253, and that has been assigned to the House Transportation Subcommittee number 4, which meets on Thursdays, and it has not come up yet. It meets on Thursday morning for 7 o'clock.
Hasn't
West, but it has not been assigned a hearing just as of yet. I'm sure that they're probably going to work out some of the recommendations that the ad hoc group and the TPO came up with. They sent a letter to him, and I am guesstimating that they're going to fix it on his side, and then when the bills come together, they'll clean them up so that they mirror one another.
Hasn't Louise been made a co-patron to Senator Wagner's bill?
Yes, she is.
Okay. Do you have any questions? Yeah.
What about the SEC bill?
What about the state corporation bill?
Public utilities bill?
Yeah.
House Bill 978. That bill was on the House floor today. There's been quite a bit of work on it between all of the interested parties, which includes not only us, but other localities, because the changes made the statewide. The emergency clause was deleted today from the bill, on the House floor, and the changes that they came up with in working with VDOT at this point changes the language where they had local governments being considered public utilities coming under the SEC. They've taken that out, and so now the way that the bill reads is that if there's a dispute between the local government and whomever's doing the PPPA or PPEA, then the SEC would be the deciding factor. We still don't like that. And so we're still working on that piece, and VDOT has agreed that they will continue to massage this bill until we all come to an agreement as it works through the legislative process. So to shorten it long, I guess my answer is it's still a work in progress.
We had a question earlier tonight about B-poll. What's the status of that?
Which B-poll?
Which?
The worst one.
I am not prepared to discuss that right now. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I know there were several of them. I think a couple of them have died. I would have to really research that, and I can get back with you on that.
Whole life support on the other ones.
Yeah, we're trying to do that. We're trying to do that up here. The good thing is that with the changes that's coming to the Senate and some of these bad bills coming out of the House will not make it through the Senate.
Have you eaten supper?
No, I have not. I haven't had a drink of water since 2 o'clock.
All right, go get it.
We're going to let you go.
Thank you, Sherry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions for Sherry?
No.
Thanks, Sherry, for everything that you're doing.
Get some rest.
All right, we love you. All right, bye-bye.
All right, good night.
Good
The
night.
days I spent up there with Sherry, that girl worked.
She really does.
She does.
That
You have to walk in her shoes.
authority issue is going to, I don't know, it's going to be a complex because you need some aspects of it, but we got to be careful with that thing because we'll wind up in there. Bill Sizemore hit me up this morning and asked me about it, so he must be going to write a piece on it tomorrow in the paper, and I don't know. What's your take on it?
Well, he's going to have a better take when he talks with Chris. I asked him to call Chris today. Yeah, and he's got to call in. We want to know what Chris' non-negotiables are. But,
Yeah, I was going to mention, I think, that there has to be some sort of an authority, and I think the way the majority of the group on the ad hoc legislative committee felt was, since the bulk of the new authority would be basically the same members coming over from the TPO, there should be very little variation. For example, one of the concerns being, could the authority reprioritize? And I think the belief is theoretically, but not likely. And then with some of those provisions are put in there, really the goals being to keep one of the concerns we've had with the TPO, as you're aware, where you seem to have certain members having oversized influence. We'll just call it that. This is hopefully going to address something.
Meeting before the meeting.
Yes, yes.
okay, we'll keep you posted.
Good.
We need a closed session, and George has got the motion.
Council has a motion.
All right, I move to go into a closed meeting pursuant to the provisions of Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711 for the following purpose: briefings by staff in consultation with legal counsel concerning actual litigation and a legal matter involving a grant and a contract as permitted under subsection A7.
Second.
Okay.
Mr. Cherry?
Yes.
Mr. Edmonds?
Yes.
Mr. Meeks?
Yes.
Mr. Moody?
Yes?
Ms. Simmons?
Yes.
Ms. Randall?
Yes.
Mayor Ryan?
Yes.
We are in closed session.
Well,
Thank
Morris,
you.
would you make sure the cameras are